So I've been getting a lot of questions on my spinal erectors. Guys want to know, Alex, how'd you acquire such thickness in the center of your back? You got 2 columns and I want that as well. Well, in today's video, I'll be sharing the exact strategies that got me these gains. And I have no doubt that you too will get jacked in this regard. So the first thing I'll mention is that I was a leg day skipper for years. Not in the sense that I didn't train them, but I was extremely lazy. I did not prioritize big, heavy compounds that load the lower back. It was mostly sissy squats, belt squats, which I still practice to this day and would highly recommend, but I wasn't doing any free squats, just to say, as well as avoiding deep pulls. You know, the stuff that challenges the upper extremities of hip flexion. I didn't do that because of one excuse. I got a bad build for pulls. Short arms, long torso, I'm bent all the way the forward. I'm doing a pen lay row. When I was so delusional because that was actually better for hypertrophy. Sure, for strength demonstration, maybe being a competitive powerlifter, it wasn't ideal, but I didn't do that anyway. And plus, if we're trying to gain mass from movement, isn't the more ROM better? It's like you guys who complain about having long arms on the bench. You got this deep stretch in the bottom. When that's better for acquiring watermelon pecs. It was the same thing with me. I avoided training what I sucked at for the lower body. What a hypocrite, because I was doing the opposite philosophy for upper, but not lower. And hence, I had these nice looking quads, but no spinal erectors. So what was the solution? First and foremost, prioritizing free weight motions that are axial loaded. So reintroducing barbell back squats of all types and hitting volume with that to build the musculature, as well as doing volume hip hinges, which is hands down the most important factor for today's video. Guys, stop just doing singles, doubles, and triples, even reps of 5. It's hard on your recovery, and you won't be able to do as much volume. You already know it, so stop lying to yourself. You know what I do to get a maximum pump and optimally stimulate them from a hypertrophy perspective? I train like a motherfucking bodybuilder. Twice a week, lower body, 3 sets of 10 on a hip hinge. Whether that be an RDL or a good morning, it doesn't freaking matter. The point is, I'll use powerlifting movements, which are just compound movements, hip hinges, but in a bodybuilding type of way. And I use dynamic double progression on these motions, which I'll be talking about more in upcoming videos. So look, I'm not doing 3 sets of 5 block pulls. And if I go heavy, that's literally the introduction of the workout. So of course, I'll hit weights at 90%. Max effort method is incorporated every single week. But that cannot be the main training modality for hip hinges. And that's the mistake that a lot of you guys are making. You only go heavy on deadlifts. And the reason you don't do volume is because of stimulus fatigue. But that's why you gotta either drop the percentages or swap it out for something like an RDL or good morning, which is what I do 9 out of 10 times. I base everything off recovery. And if I can get 60 reps a week on variations that simply give me bad leverages, long moment arms, because my center of mass is so far off, and we're making all kinds of gains. And the thing is, with good mornings in particular, I don't just do low bar. I'll use the SSB in reverse. So the camber is upside down, which will literally pitch you all the way forward. So I rotate between those, the regular SSB version, which is by default going to be a high bar position. And guess what? When I want to make my torso even longer, I'll do good mornings with the bar on my neck. Now, how is that accomplished, you ask? Very simple. You get yourself a pussy pad. No one's going to call you a pussy when you turn around and there's Greek god pillars popping out of your t-shirt, or you just being shirtless and it's there and it's visible for everybody to see. So don't be an idiot. Use this if you're going to put the bar literally up here. That's how you get even more out of less weight. And you can do this on seated good mornings or standing up. But the point is, we do hip hinges for reps, which is not only superior for developing the prime movers of the posterior chain, but it'll finally correct your spinal erector weakness. And most lifters I see aren't doing this because it's hard. So they gravitate towards machines because they're more stable. It's better for localized hypertrophy in the legs, which is absolutely valid in a bodybuilding context if we're talking about the legs in isolation. By doing that, there's obviously going to be less bias back here. And the same goes for squats, by the way. When you do low bar in particular, your torso is going to be more bent forward. And from a side angle, a lot of people don't realize this, but the torso lean is either equivalent to the tibial lean or even exceeds it in some cases. And that's why a lot of guys get such great carryover from doing good mornings to the low bar squats. If your spinal erectors are weak, you're not maximizing your 1 rep max. And the way that I see it, if you can maintain spinal rigidity when doing squats for reps, which are already brutal as hell, man, there's no reason why you wouldn't grow a lot in the spinal erectors, combined with the hip hinges, of course. All right, so enough about the main stuff. Let's now discuss doing direct work. For me, I favor reverse hyperextensions. Rest in peace, Louis Simmons. I bought that machine because of him. I started doing reverse hypers because of him. He broke his back and repaired it with this amazing exercise. So I own the Westside Scout Hyper, can't recommend it enough. And I pretty much use it almost every lower body workout and sometimes on off days. So I've been doing them for quite some time now and hit the point where the machine is maxed out. I can do 4 plates aside for over 30 reps, no problem. What do you think the side effect was? Hypertrophy. Because you're getting dynamic motion. You're actually flexing and extending the spine, which is something that you don't really get from traditional hip hinges. And when you think about hypertrophy training, what is generally viewed as optimal? Dynamic motion, not just isometrics. Now, of course, you can angle yourself at 45 degrees or 90 and do flexion and extension that way, or even do things like Jefferson curls, but those are probably a little bit harder on your recovery with limited loading potential. And you're not really getting a tractioning effect. Whereas reverse hyper, you're pulling on the discs and pumping lots of fluid into the lower back. So it's rejuvenation plus muscle building at the same time. Therefore, you can hit these 2-4 times a week, even go into failure if you desire, and not feel trash in the slightest. So we can abuse these like no other, and they're best done at the end of a workout, after the axial loading. Isn't that the optimal combination for building a lower back of steel without injuries? And let me tell you guys, because of my horrible build, I've been prone to lower back issues. But because of the maximized way that I train, that's no longer a problem. I got stupid thick back there. And overuse rarely kicks in anymore. Whereas in the past, lower back was hands down my number one weakness. Now, of all things, it's become my freaking hamstrings. Never in a million years did I believe that was going to be the problem. But that's what I'm saying. When you constantly work on your weaknesses, a new weakness arises. Often unexpected. So, all this to say, reverse hypers, reverse hypers, reverse hypers. Then, you should also consider doing back extensions, which I recently introduced about 2 months ago. And they've been very helpful in complementing my good mornings. So I'll hit them about once a week, and I do them at a 90-degree angle with a full range of motion. I put it on my neck to increase the lever, make things more difficult. You don't need a tremendous amount of weight. Just to say, many Olympic weightlifters don't do more than around 135 pounds. So chances are most people will struggle to even do an empty bar, if I'm being honest. Intermediate advanced lifters can obviously do a lot more than that, but if you're just starting off, I'd recommend really taking your time. And I actually use an easy bar for this because you can start off with a weight that's below the empty bar. And then you can slowly progress from there on. Now again, you're getting more out of less weight, and this will be considered a tier 3 exercise. So we could rank it like this. Conventional deadlift is tier 1, a good morning is tier 2, and then a back extension is tier 3. Done deal. By practicing all 3, you're pretty much covered. And so, pump it, man. Hit reps of 8 to 15, somewhere in that range, and just get stronger over time. Finally, one of the most interesting changes that has led to a lot more hypertrophy is eliminating non-chest supported rows that are generally free weighted, like barbell rows, just being bent forward with 2 dumbbells in your hands, even trap bar rows. Anything where your spinal erectors are loaded, I've cut those out, which might sound extremely ironic and strange because this video is all about developing these muscles, but the way that I see it, lower back recovery is a precious resource, and you're substituting indirect work with direct work. That's far more effective. In other words, if you're no longer doing barbell rows, you favor cable rows, inverted rows, weighted pull-ups, things that don't tax your lower back at all. That essentially allows you to do more volume on the hip hinges with far more intensity and frequency. And by doing that, the quality of work is going to be higher in the spinal erectors, which is especially notable on an upper-lower routine or anything that's high frequency. So if you do upper, lower, off, upper, lower, your spinal erectors would get hit 4 times a week. So there's tremendous overlap. And as a result, you can't quite push yourself as hard. Otherwise, you'd have serious recovery problems. But if you have 72 hours of recovery between the sessions, doesn't that mean you could load your spine more on the lower body days? There'll be less desire to do machine work. You can do hip hinges twice a week. You can hit higher reps without feeling trash. You can do harder variations. Heck, instead of even splitting things up into 1 session pull from the floor, 1 session block pull, you can literally do deep pulls on both days. This is not unrealistic when you cut out the indirect work in the spinal erectors. You see what I mean? Start thinking about overlap and how you can minimize that, and I promise you'll have much better direct sessions. By doing this, you'll feel way more refreshed, and I'd argue won't affect your strength gains. So if you're doing RDLs with 4 plates for reps, you're doing good mornings with over 2 plates for reps, and you're hammering that in week after week, what do you think a 2-plate barbell row is, or even 250, or anything that would be considered a moderate heavy weight? It's nothing, because you've trained your spinal erectors with more intensity, more range of motion, more difficulty. That's all I'm trying to say. So give them a slight break, which is only going to be 24 hours. That's it. That's all I'm telling you to do. And you'll have much more productive lower body days. And in turn, more thickness, which is exactly what you're seeing with me. And with that said, I got nothing else to share. Hope you learned from these experiences. Give me your feedback on trained lower back, just getting that titanium action. Let's hear it. And I'll talk to you all next time.